China Coast Guard vessel 5201. This is a solemn statement. According to the Chinese laws and the international laws, China has indisputable sovereignty over islands in the South China Sea.
The latest development from Manila has put a crucial question at the center of the South China Sea dispute. Does China now have a say over when Philippine vessels can reach the BRP Sierra Madre?
Philippine President confident that Manila can work with Beijing on economic issues despite dispute on territory in the South China Sea.
On August 14, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. pushed back against that interpretation, saying the provisional arrangement between Manila and Beijing for the rotation and resupply of Philippine troops at Second Thomas Shoal does not weaken Philippine sovereign rights, territorial claims, or its position under international law.
There's no special arrangement that somehow the implication is that we have to ask for permission or that we have to give up some of our rights. That's not the case at all.
The Philippine government describes the mechanism as notification. Manila informs China about the movement of its vessels, rather than asking Beijing for permission to carry out the mission. And that distinction is becoming one of the most important details in the entire confrontation. Because if the Philippines is simply telling China, our vessel is coming, that is one thing. But if the process eventually becomes, can our vessel come? The strategic meaning is completely different. Manila insists that it has not crossed that line. But now that this mechanism is becoming part of the routine around the Sierra Madre, the bigger question is whether it can remain a tool for preventing dangerous confrontations or whether Beijing could eventually use it to gain greater operational leverage over Philippine movements. That is why the latest statement from Marcos matters. The issue is no longer simply about an old military ship sitting on a disputed shoal. It is about whether the Philippines can cooperate with China to reduce the risk of conflict without allowing that cooperation to undermine Philippine freedom of action.
You do not possess any legal authority to patrol inside the Philippines' exclusive economic zone.
To understand why the arrangement exists, you have to understand what happens every time the Philippines tries to reach the BRP Sierra Madre. The ship has been deliberately grounded at Second Thomas Shoal since 1999 and now serves as a Philippine military outpost. It is old, damaged, and hardly an impressive piece of naval hardware. But the vessel itself is not really the point. Its importance comes from where it sits and what its continued presence represents for the Philippines. The Philippines needs to keep personnel stationed there, deliver food and water, provide equipment, maintain the outpost, and eventually repair or reinforce it. But every resupply mission has the potential to become a confrontation with Chinese maritime forces. That confrontation is not theoretical. Philippine and Chinese vessels have repeatedly faced each other around the shoal, and the June 2024 confrontation was particularly serious. The danger was no longer simply diplomatic pressure or verbal warnings. Physical encounters at sea created the possibility of injuries, collisions, and a much larger crisis between two countries that already disagree fundamentally over sovereignty and maritime rights. That is the environment in which the provisional arrangement emerged. Manila has a practical problem. It must continue resupplying its personnel. Beijing has a strategic objective. It wants to prevent the Philippines from strengthening or normalizing its position at Second Thomas Shoal. Neither side has abandoned its fundamental position. Instead, they have tried to create a mechanism that reduces the possibility that every resupply mission turns into another dangerous confrontation. And that tells us something important about the arrangement from the beginning. It is not a settlement of the South China Sea dispute. It is not a recognition of Chinese sovereignty. It is not an agreement resolving the competing claims. It is a crisis management mechanism created because both sides have an interest in preventing a confrontation at sea from spiraling into something much bigger. The BRP Sierra Madre is an aging vessel, but describing it simply as a rusting military ship misses the strategic significance of Second Thomas Shoal. The vessel has become a physical symbol of Philippine presence in an area where China is trying to establish greater practical control. That makes every resupply mission much more consequential than the delivery of supplies to a remote military outpost. Think about the sequence. The Philippines maintains personnel on the Sierra Madre. Those personnel require regular supplies. A Philippine vessel sails toward the shoal. Chinese vessels monitor the movement. The two sides communicate, maneuver, and attempt to influence what happens next. If the encounter remains controlled, the Philippine mission proceeds. If the confrontation escalates, suddenly an operation involving a relatively small number of personnel becomes an international incident involving two governments and potentially their militaries. This is why the Sierra Madre has become a geopolitical outpost. Its strategic value comes from the Philippine physical presence it represents. That physical presence supports Manila's operational presence, which in turn reinforces its broader maritime position. Remove the outpost, and the strategic circumstances around Second Thomas Shoal could look very different.
The Chinese did not have the authority or the right to confiscate these supply packages, which were meant for the soldiers, our Philippine soldiers, on board the BRP Sierra Madre.
For China, therefore, Philippine resupply missions are not merely logistical activities. For Manila, they are not merely routine naval operations. Every mission becomes a test of whether the Philippines can continue maintaining its presence without being forced into a confrontation. That is why the new arrangement matters. There is another layer to this story, and it explains why Marcos is being so careful with his language. The Philippines' position in the South China Sea is heavily connected to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, and the 2016 arbitral ruling in the South China Sea case. The tribunal rejected the legal basis for China's expansive historic rights claims beyond the maritime entitlements recognized under UNCLOS. China rejected the ruling, but Manila continues to regard it as a central legal foundation for its position. So when Marcos says the arrangement does not weaken Philippine sovereign rights, he is making a very deliberate distinction. The operational procedure may change. The legal position does not. That distinction is crucial because countries can make temporary operational arrangements without abandoning their broader legal claims. Manila can communicate with Beijing about the movement of Philippine vessels while continuing to maintain that those communications do not give China jurisdiction over Philippine operations. This is the line Marcos wants to preserve. Operational accommodation does not automatically equal legal concession. And that becomes particularly important because China and the Philippines do not describe the maritime dispute in the same way. If one side begins treating a temporary operational arrangement as evidence that the other side has accepted its authority, the political meaning of the arrangement could change dramatically. That is why the words surrounding the agreement matter almost as much as the agreement itself. This is where the real strategic danger lies. Manila says it notifies China about its movements. It does not ask Beijing for permission. Today, that distinction may appear clear. But what happens 6 months from now? What happens after 10 more resupply missions? What happens if the notification process becomes more detailed? What happens if China begins demanding information about routes, timing, vessels, or personnel? What happens if Beijing starts arguing that Philippine missions should follow specific conditions? There is a potential progression here. It can begin with a notification. We are informing you that our vessel is approaching. Then it can become coordination. We are coordinating the movement with you. Then conditions can emerge. Your vessel must follow these requirements. And eventually, if the process goes far enough, it could become permission. You cannot conduct the mission unless we approve it. There is no evidence in the material provided that the arrangement has reached that final stage, and it would be wrong to claim that it has. The Philippines explicitly says it is not asking China for permission. But that is precisely why the evolution of the mechanism needs to be watched. The vulnerability is not necessarily that Manila has already surrendered sovereignty. The more subtle danger is that operational dependence can develop even while the legal position remains unchanged. A country can maintain its legal claim on paper while gradually losing freedom of action in practice. That is the strategic question Manila has to manage. The Philippines and China are approaching the arrangement from very different strategic positions. For Manila, the immediate objective is predictability. Philippine vessels need to reach the Sierra Madre. Manila wants those missions to happen without collisions, injuries, or confrontations that could escalate into a larger crisis. A functioning notification mechanism could make movements more predictable, reduce misunderstandings, and create a channel for communication when something goes wrong. Most importantly, it could allow the Philippines to maintain its outpost while reducing the risk associated with getting there. For Beijing, the calculation is different. China can gain greater visibility into Philippine movements around the shoal. It can know when missions are approaching and potentially gain another channel through which to manage the dispute. That does not mean China has gained legal jurisdiction over the area, and it does not mean the Philippines has accepted Chinese sovereignty. But information itself can have strategic value. The key question is whether that information remains simply a tool for deconfliction or gradually becomes political leverage. That gives us the central tension of the entire arrangement. Manila wants deconfliction without dependence. Beijing may prefer deconfliction that increases its influence over how Philippine operations are conducted. Those two objectives can coexist for a while, but they can also collide. And then came the real-world test. On July 20, Philippine and Chinese personnel clashed near Second Thomas Shoal. The Philippines said a Filipino sailor was injured and accused Chinese personnel of attacking him. China presented a different version, accusing Philippine personnel of provoking the confrontation. The incident then escalated diplomatically, with both sides summoning each other's envoys. This incident matters because it exposes the fundamental limitation of any provisional arrangement. An agreement can create communication channels. It can establish procedures. It can reduce misunderstandings. But it cannot automatically eliminate the underlying strategic competition. The sovereignty dispute remains. The competing maritime claims remain. The strategic importance of Second Thomas Shoal remains. And both sides still want different outcomes. So even with an arrangement in place, confrontations can still happen. That is precisely why Marcos's August 14 statement matters.
There's no special arrangement that somehow the implication is that we have to ask for permission or that we have to give up some of our rights. That's not the case at all.
Manila is making sure that the existence of a practical mechanism does not get interpreted as an acceptance of Chinese authority. The arrangement may manage the confrontation. It does not resolve the confrontation. And that difference is enormous. The Sierra Madre story also fits into a much larger strategy under Marcos. It would be too simplistic to describe his China policy as either pro-China or anti-China. The reality is much more complicated. Manila is strengthening its security relationship with the United States and other partners while simultaneously maintaining diplomatic engagement with Beijing. It is defending Philippine maritime rights while still exploring areas where cooperation with China might be possible. That broader approach can be understood as compartmentalization. Security competition in one area, legal resistance in another, diplomatic engagement alongside both, and potentially economic cooperation where interests overlap. That was visible again on August 14, when Marcos said talks with China on possible joint oil and gas exploration were making progress despite the continuing maritime dispute.
We are very much in cooperation with China. We have to find new ways. So that's why, as I said, this discussion has gained prominence. And where are we at now? I think we have moved forward. There were several issues from the beginning that we are slowly working through. I can see a distinct possibility that there will be such joint exploration.
This tells us something important about Manila's overall strategy. The Philippines is not trying to solve every disagreement with China at once. Instead, it is attempting to separate areas of competition from areas where cooperation might still be possible. But compartmentalization has a limit. If economic cooperation begins affecting Manila's willingness to defend its maritime rights, the strategy becomes politically difficult. If diplomatic engagement begins restricting Philippine military operations, the same problem emerges. And if a crisis management mechanism around the Sierra Madre starts becoming a mechanism through which China can determine what Philippine vessels are allowed to do, then the compartments begin to collapse. The next resupply missions will tell us more than the language of any press conference. The first thing to watch is whether Philippine missions proceed smoothly. If the mechanism allows Philippine vessels to reach the Sierra Madre with fewer confrontations, then Manila can reasonably argue that it is doing exactly what it was designed to do, reducing the danger of accidental escalation while preserving the Philippine presence. The second thing to watch is whether China begins demanding more. Routes, timing, vessels, personnel, additional notifications, or other requirements could reveal whether the arrangement is remaining a simple communication mechanism or becoming increasingly restrictive. None of those developments should automatically be interpreted as a loss of sovereignty, but they would show that operational influence is becoming more significant. The third thing to watch is the language used by Beijing itself. Does China describe the mechanism as notification, coordination, an agreement, or something closer to permission? Those words matter because each side will attempt to define the political meaning of the arrangement. And finally, watch Manila. Will Philippine officials continue repeating the same principle? The Philippines informs China, but it does not ask China for permission? If that principle remains intact, Manila can argue that the arrangement is simply a crisis management tool. If that principle begins to change, even subtly, the strategic meaning of the arrangement changes with it. So did Marcos give China more control over the Sierra Madre? Based on Manila's stated position, the answer is no. But that does not mean there is nothing to watch. The real issue is what happens after the arrangement becomes routine. Because there is a fundamental difference between communicating with China to prevent a dangerous collision and allowing China to determine whether a Philippine vessel can reach a Philippine military outpost. Marcos is insisting that the Philippines remains on the first side of that line. Notification, yes. Communication, yes. Deconfliction, yes. Chinese jurisdiction, no. Chinese permission, no. And that is ultimately what the next Sierra Madre missions will test. The battle around Second Thomas Shoal is no longer only about whether the Philippines can physically reach an old military outpost. It is about whether Manila can cooperate with Beijing to prevent dangerous confrontations without allowing that cooperation to become Chinese control. That is the delicate balance Marcos is now trying to maintain. And the most important question is not what the two sides call the arrangement today. It is what that arrangement allows each side to do tomorrow.